Hello and welcome to Bottom Line. We have a great informative show for you today. We're going to be talking about managing chronic conditions with telehealth. I'd like to introduce my guest for today's show. We have Grace Silverio, registered nurse and director of the solution strategy at Teladoc Health. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Michelle Buelow, who is a registered dietitian nutritionist and a health coach with Teladoc Health. Welcome, Michelle, to the show.
Thank you for having me.
You know, maybe we'll start off to kind of help level set the topic of telehealth, telemedicine, teledoc. Maybe these are terms that people maybe have heard, maybe familiar with, maybe not familiar with. So maybe, Grace, we could start with you to see, just to kind of level set for today's show, what maybe is considered telehealth?
Yeah, sure. So telehealth is the delivery of healthcare services remotely using technology like video calls or apps. Teladoc Health happens to be the leader providing and offering virtual care for everything from general health to mental health and chronic conditions. We break down barriers by providing 24/7 care and access from anywhere, eliminating the need for travel or long wait times, which can be really frustrating and inconvenient. And we also support preventative care through making sure that people are aware of those early preventative screenings, wellness coaching, and ongoing monitoring to catch any issues before they become serious or more serious conditions. So we really do offer something for everyone. And, you know, prevention is at the top of the list, but also just managing and improving health overall.
And Grace, as you mentioned that, just to focus on this for a minute, just the general topic here, when should people consider it? Like, for instance, people might think of telehealth or medicine, oh, you know, maybe if I think I have a cold or a sinus infection. What are maybe some misconceptions that they can use telehealth and teledoc for, even more so than just for the common cold?
Yeah, you're right. So there is that 24/7 care. So when you do have that cold or you think you're getting a sinus infection, you can absolutely use our 24/7 care and remote monitoring. But you can also have that longitudinal relationship with a primary care provider that follows you throughout that journey. And just like in brick and mortar, has a team around them to support you with a registered nurse and a medical assistant that is there, not only to address any long-term conditions and health, but also, again, that prevention. So they can see, you know, are you up to date on your mammogram, for an example, or do you need a colonoscopy? And then we take it a step further. We can see, you know, what's in network to get you the highest quality provider that's in network, that's cost effective, and make that referral. And it's almost like a concierge to make sure that you are completing that screening and get the support that you need.
Right. And just to kind of close the loop on kind of talking as a general, is there anyone who really shouldn't use teledoc or telehealth at any point? I'm assuming, of course, if it's a 911, people should go to emergency room and, you know, just don't rely on that type of technology.
I think you said it. Yeah. If it's an emergency, I think, you know, you need to go to your local ER emergency department. Absolutely. But I can't see a reason why anyone wouldn't want to use, telehealth. It's just so convenient and they do an amazing job of supporting you. It's virtual first, but it's not virtual only, right? There's definitely times and instances where you do need to go to an in-person or brick and mortar PCP, and we can help with that as well. Like I mentioned, making sure that it's in network and it's right for you.
Right. And one of the things, and Michelle, I think, you know, it might even be surprising for people to know and realize that there's actually a health coach that can help with that, you know, with a person's health, you know, and I think one of the things that's so important about it is kind of that whole person type approach. So is there a misconception that someone might not know that you exist as a health coach out there at Teladoc?
I hope not. We're here. No. It's so interesting, right? I think one of the big things people get nervous with telehealth is it going to just be an app? Am I actually going to have that human touch? And you do. So in terms of coaching, you know, once you get a diagnosis, you kind of swim openly, you look online, how do I manage this condition? And I think the beauty of health coaching is we're alongside with you for that ride. But yeah, with health coaching, it's just a nice accountability aspect to go along with you. And yes, there's recipes online. I mean, the app has so many different avenues, like Grace had mentioned, but the actual health coaching is something that a lot of people I don't want to say they don't know about it, but once they have it, it's an ongoing relationship.
Right.
Yeah.
And if we look at this and now kind of maybe delve into managing, chronic condition. For instance, we're going to talk today, I think, and highlight kind of heart disease. And it's still amazing that after 100 years, heart disease is still the number one, killing factor in the United States. So that, it's still a staggering amount. And I think people who are watching, it could be a misconception that how in the world can I manage my chronic health through Teladoc? And Grace, could you help us walk through how that may happen or take place when someone makes that call, or what's the first steps when they say, I'd like to know more and get involved with this?
Yeah, absolutely. So with high blood pressure or hypertension, when someone is diagnosed, they can enroll into our program, and we provide our members with devices so that you can conveniently, easily start those self-monitoring behaviors within your home. You receive a blood pressure monitor that not only captures your blood pressure, but also your heart rate. It has an adjustable cuff. We follow the American Heart Association's Essential 8. Every time you check your blood pressure, not only are you getting a result, but it's automatically syncing into the platform. So it's cellular enabled. So no Bluetooth needed, no Wi-Fi dependency there. It automatically syncs into the platform. They're getting daily lessons. Usually when you're diagnosed with hypertension, you're told to follow the DASH diet or low sodium. And Michelle alluded to this. We have a library with extensive recipes that follow those heart healthy guidelines, like the DASH diet, just as an example. But we have the coaches, and I always love to brag on our coaches. I love Michelle as well. She's an amazing coach and registered dietitian, but we take it to that next level to create an even more personalized experience to make sure that people are aware on what those numbers mean, why it matters, and to self-monitor and educate them to help further their health literacy when it comes to improving their blood pressure.
Right. How does it get coordinated then if someone does, they get the blood pressure cuff at home, they take their blood pressure, things, are with the, like you said, cellular data, so that if the information is there, you don't need, Bluetooth and some of those other things that people kind of maybe worry about for technology.
Right.
What happens when they do find out if one of their risk factors is having an issue, let's say with high blood pressure? Is there coordination with someone here at a local level where they live, or?
So within the app, when someone checks their blood pressure and it's hypertensive, let's say, according to the American Heart Association, so that top number we're looking at is 180 or greater. If in that moment or real time they trigger that high blood pressure reading, we actually send a notification via the phone and in the app that is essentially triaging them to say, hey, listen, this is hypertensive crisis. If you're having symptoms with this, and we list out the symptoms, you need to seek immediate care or call 911, right? You're at risk for heart attack or stroke potentially, especially with symptoms in the high reading. But if it's a one-off, we also then educate to say, okay, if you have this high reading, but you're not experiencing these symptoms, wait 5 minutes and then check again. But directing them to make sure that they're also sharing that information with their provider. And we make it super easy. There's a health summary report so that every time they do check their blood pressure, they don't have to manually write anything down. They can easily access this data and share it with their external provider so that they're aware of what's happening with those readings and that biometric information that they themselves can easily access and then easily share. But we also encourage them to do that with their provider as well.
And Michelle, as a health coach, you are also reaching out and helping individuals kind of work through things, probably help alleviate some of their worries and concerns as well.
Definitely. So what Grace was referring to in real time, they have a hypertensive crisis. What can be helpful is, if they meet with the doctor after that to discuss it, or let's say that they just want follow-up. They don't have a hypertensive crisis, but their blood pressure is high. Us as a coach, we're able to see all of the reads. And we're able to see, timestamps. So if I'm working with a member and we realize that they're checking their blood pressure in a hectic morning, right after they've had coffee, we can even go over, hey, maybe do this at a different time that's a little more calm. And I think the biggest thing that does come up when working with members is they want to know, how can I control my blood pressures? And it's really, important for us as a coach to go over the risk factors. So what I go over with my members there's uncontrollable and controllable. So the controllable ones are ones that, there are positive steps that you can do to manage these risk factors. And that's the point of meeting with a coach. And things that can be controllable are things like high blood pressure. We often call it the silent killer. It damages the heart, the kidneys, and it's just something people may not even have symptoms of, which is such a beautiful thing to have the cuff. You may feel fine, but we notice these are where the reads are. Other things we work on with certain members are managing things like cholesterol, smoking cessation. Other risk factors for heart disease are overweight and obesity. So if that's someone's goal, we can work on them there. Physical inactivity, and then of course, nutrition. Yes, I'm a registered dietitian, but we focus on things that are realistic for the member, right? Instead of being cookie cutter and saying, hey, well, if you need to manage your heart condition, eat this way, we need to make it work for each individual person. And then, of course, the uncontrollables, things like age, family history, and genetics. So long-winded way to say that we're able to see those numbers and really work as a team with our members to go over some of these risk factors and way to help alleviate those.
Right. And I think one of the things that's really important that I've learned about Teladoc too is, as you mentioned, there's so many programs out there. There's a program for this, program for that, but you're also integrating all those programs and all those things into something that's customizable to that person. Sure, there's these off the shelf, sure, there's this library, but then it becomes getting customized, which is wonderful, because then they have somebody, a registered nursing tech, then they have a registered dietitian they can speak to. I would say, Grace, as these, as you're being director of solution strategy and that, how are you always being challenged on what's new on the horizon? How else can we look at what can help someone in being better health, working against, for instance, heart disease?
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of new, one thing that we're really kind of changing our approach is just thinking about prevention and risk reduction, right? Michelle touched on this. Chronic conditions don't develop overnight, right? They develop slowly. It's my experience as a registered nurse. They don't just show up in the hospital and it's like, boom, they've been starting. And so helping people become more aware of those risk factors, right? There's the modifiable ones and the non-modifiable ones that Michelle touched on. And so this is something that we're really helping people to achieve, which is true cardiometabolic health. And by doing that is making them aware of, hey, so what you can do is you can start to lose weight. You can better manage your weight or maintain it. You can also start to increase your physical activity. Improving sleep quality is another big one that the American Heart Association added, maybe 3 years ago, to the importance of how that can better manage your blood pressure, weight, and can affect so many different areas. Weight and obesity, that tends to be the root cause of these and so many other chronic conditions. But knowing your numbers, cholesterol, A1C, and then working with a coach, but providing that education and the support. So from the moment that someone enrolls in our programs, we do a really good job of making them aware of all of the different tools and resources that we have. It's not cookie cutter, like Michelle said. It really, truly is recognizing that everyone's journey is going to be different. So it's not a one size fits all approach, for sure. We want to take different people's cultures, ethnicities, budgets into consideration so that they can make realistic, sustainable changes over time too.
And Michelle, I was going to ask you to kind of add on to what, Grace is talking about there, especially when it comes to, for instance, diabetes. And I think, there's some statistics out there that, there may be even 1 million people or so, even in Michigan alone, that's suffering with some kind of diabetes, type 1, type 2, or pre-diabetic. How do you help work with someone when they find out they're diabetic and how to do the struggle, maybe not only just physically, but also mentally?
Yeah, it's the first thing from a coach's end when someone gets a new diagnosis of diabetes is just letting them feel heard. That's terrifying, right? To get a chronic condition, Grace mentioned, it doesn't develop overnight. That doesn't make it any less terrifying to hear that you have this. And with the stats, I mean, like you said, almost 1 million people in Michigan alone, and I'm a Michigander. I'm in Chicago now, but I grew up in Michigan. I mean, that's a family member, right? That's so many different people. So when working with somebody with diabetes, it's important to let them know the risk factors. Similar to heart disease, there are some that coincide with one another. But what I tell people, it's first, let's focus on what type. All right. So if someone's newly diagnosed with type 1, it's just letting them understand that this is what's happening. It's autoimmune. Okay. It's the pancreas is making little to no insulin, right? And I think that's the biggest one is what type of diabetes do I have? And starting from there. So with type 1, there is a family and a genetic component to it, and age. Okay. It can happen at any age in terms of type 1, but it usually does develop when you're a little bit younger. But again, can happen at any age. And then also, if you have pre-diabetes or type 2 diabetes, going over the risk factors there. Similar to heart disease, it can be overweight and obesity. There are certain high-risk populations, so making that known. Other things like the family history, or even I work with several people that go, what have I done? How did I do this? And it's letting them know it may not be anything that you've done yourself. A family history has it. Gestational diabetes history can increase the risk factors for developing pre and type 2 diabetes, and other conditions associated with things like insulin resistance, so PCOS or polycystic ovarian syndrome. So it's just normalizing the fact that it's nothing you did wrong. It is scary, but we can work with you in a different way than maybe in the past. You're diagnosed with diabetes, go fly solo and figure it out. Now, it is just such a neat thing to be with these members on their journey to say, hey, you're not, for example, Michelle with diabetes, you're Michelle with a life, and we'll manage this together. But those are some of the risk factors. And just like heart disease, you can change some of these behaviors to really help reduce your risk of ultimately, developing diabetes.
And do you find that there's a misconception that people don't realize that through Teladoc, they can actually manage their diabetes that way? Do they feel like maybe they have to go into a doctor's office and try to be able to see someone in person that way versus doing a telesession?
I think it's a mixed bag. I work with people who go, so wait, you're doing everything that I could do in clinic with, a certified diabetes care and education specialist. And yeah, we can go over different behaviors, nutrition, physical activity, sleep, stress management. And then, of course, I think the number one caveat in the past might have been you can't check your blood sugars. Well, now you can. And as a coach, I can see all of the reads. They can even tag it on the meter how they're feeling. So if I'm working with, let's say, Cindy, and we're having a conversation and I see the blood sugar of 300, she's able to say she was stressed out. So we can dig a little bit further into that. But I think a lot of people, when they first start the program, wonder how could this be as effective as going in person? And they quickly realize that it is as effective.
Right.
So.
And I think what seems even beneficial is it's can be almost 24/7, even though maybe someone's not available to speak to 24/7, but you're being monitored, and like you said, you can be proactive as a coach to be able to reach out and say, hey, I see these numbers are very high, and what's happening and what's going on in that.
Yeah. Another neat feature too, and I think we'll touch on this in a little bit, is there's coaching. And then we also have a team where someone, let's say, has a high blood sugar. They alert the team. So there actually is 24/7 outreach with our coaches, which is pretty neat because let's say it's 4 a.m. and you have a high blood sugar, you're not alone, right? It doesn't excuse, like we talked about earlier, if you do need to go to the emergency room. But if we have a high read and we're able to work with you to bring it down safely, it's 24/7, which is really neat. Mm-hmm.
Which is great because it just takes a weight off someone mentally to know 24/7 they can. And of course, if there's always an emergency 911, they should go to ER. But for other type of these things that you're trying to help just manage some of the conditions, it's nice to know you have that safety net.
Yeah.
Grace,
Exactly.
Yeah. And Grace, as we talk about other programs, other risk factors for heart disease, as we've been talking about, is weight management. And through Teladoc, how do we help try to customize maybe someone's program when it comes to weight management? Because I think everybody would like to be healthier. Maybe they're not overweight, but they still want to eat healthier. How does Teladoc and some of your programs help them do that?
100%. Yeah. So we provide them with a scale. It's also a cellular enabled scale. We're taking in height and weight to calculate BMI. And then we're also making the recommended 5% minimum weight loss, which is clinically significant. I always like to say that, I've been on many a weight loss journey and have been overly ambitious myself. And so it's nice to have this kind of safe place to start that's clinically relevant, but it can be edited along the way. Again, we're presenting them with all the different tools and resources they have available. So we have the action plan. So action plan lets members set both short and long-term goals. And then we have activities to help them reach those goals that take a holistic approach. So yes, weight loss is the ultimate goal, but again, so is making sure that you're increasing your physical activity. That's so important, that you're thinking about mindfulness and stress management, that you're also thinking about your sleep quality, your sleep hygiene, as I like to say, and how that can positively and or negatively impact your weight loss journey. We have an extensive library of commonly eaten grocery foods and restaurant foods that they can search and log their meals within our food log, all integrated into a seamless app experience They also then have the ability to get and receive food insights. So they can see their caloric intake, they can see their macro breakdown, as well as sodium and potassium. And then our amazing coaches, they'll actually receive proactive food log feedback when they're consistently logging their foods from a registered or a licensed dietitian to provide that increased personalization. But of course, if they're working with a coach, a majority of our coaches are nationally board certified health and wellness coaches, and or if they're working, with a coach within the diabetes management solution, they're going to be a certified diabetes care and education specialist as well. So really creating a personalized experience, not a restrictive diet, right? The diet that's going to work for you is the one that's realistic and sustainable. And so I always like to say, I know I already mentioned this, but you have to be realistic. It's Cinco de Mayo today. Like you can't, say like, don't eat your tortillas and your rice and your beans, right? Like that would blow somebody's whole entire cultural identity out of the water. And so we want to be realistic about that as well.
Exactly. And I think sometimes if we try to restrict ourselves too much, then we fail. Yes. Sometimes right. It would just be small steps. Now you mentioned this, and I have to ask this question though. You mentioned that part of the weight loss management or trying to just manage weight is a scale. So are people hesitant to have a scale that's connected to their coach, and for exactly those days that maybe the weekend you had a little too much to eat, or
right? And I think that's part of it, right? It's all about being our coaches are amazing, very positive language. They receive additional in-house training on motivational interviewing and culture and humility competency. And so we try to educate people, like stepping on the scale every day has its benefits, but not everybody wants to do that. And that's okay too, right? And so coming up with what is going to work best for you, but like that, it sounds cheesy and cliche maybe, but like knowledge is power, right? So when we know where we are, and just stay on top of that. And that's true for any of our numbers, right? Whether it's your blood pressure, or your blood sugar, or your weight.
Yep. And I'm curious, and this question will go for Michelle as a health coach. If I'm struggling, now, if it's heart disease, there's many risk factors. There's going to be, of course, high blood pressure, diabetes, weight management. We talked about sleep, stress, and so forth. But, maybe my diabetes is the part that's off more than another. Will someone be assigned a specific health coach for that area? Or is most of the health coaches then, of course, educated in all the areas, so you can kind of, be able to help, whether it's a diabetes related or a weight management area that's being a big risk factor for, let's say, heart disease?
Sure. That's a good question. If you're in the diabetes management program, the coaches do have a different credential. So it's the Certified Diabetes Care and Education Specialist. So that's the one caveat. All of our other coaches can do hypertension, weight management, the diabetes prevention management, and they have credentials to be able to do all of that the different programs out there. The diabetes management's a little different in terms of the coaching credential.
Okay. And as we're talking, for you, Michelle, as a coach, how do you go about helping someone reduce stress? Because we all have it, and it's always there. It's something I think everybody deals with, and everyone would love to do better at. Is there some wisdom from you as a health coach?
Well, I wish, and I think this is such a good segue, right? I wish I could sit here and say, well, don't be stressed. Right? Of course, but the whole point of coaching is finding the realistic change. A stat that we found recently is that Michigan ranks number 24 in the most stressed states. So guys, we're right in the middle there. And what do we do to reduce stress? So what I tell people is when I'm working with a member, it has to be individualized. I can't sit here and say, one, don't be stressed, or two, find more time to work out when the reason they're stressed is time management. So what we can work on with members, it's the gamut. To be quite honest, my first recommendation is identifying the source of your stress. I've been working with some members, and we find out that they're not sleeping well due to stress because they're listening to the news, let's say right before bed. That's causing stress. Now they're not sleeping well, and that kind of cycles in. So first, identify where your stress is coming from, and then move forward. What I work on with people is they think immediately to reduce stress, they have to meditate. And meditation's amazing, but it doesn't just have to be meditation. It's finding mindfulness, which if you try to practice mindfulness, it's being in the moment. It reduces stress. It can help with emotional eating. It can also help coping with unhealthy habits. Other things people don't think about too is if you have an unhealthy diet, that can create certain stress throughout the body. Sleep, okay, a healthy sleep routine is something I work on with a lot of members. And again, I try to make it real. I don't expect everyone to turn off the TV 2 hours before bedtime, right? That's someone's typical routine, but maybe we can talk about, reducing blue light 30 minutes in to get more sleep. Another one too is creating boundaries. I need a coach for this probably as well. Creating boundaries around your workplace, your friends, your family, to avoid burnout. It's okay to, do what you want to do or do nothing from time to time. Another one too is honestly seeking support. Yes, I'm here as a coach, but leaning on family, leaning on friends. If you're feeling stressed out, what I tell people, they think maybe sometimes coming to coaching, like we said, we've got the scale, the blood pressure cuff, the blood sugar meter. They think it's all about numbers. If I'm working with a member and the reason their numbers are elevated is due to stress, we're not going to sit here and ask them to check their blood sugar more often. We're going to work on stress reduction because those numbers do get impacted. I will say stress is probably one of the most common things that come up in coaching calls, and people don't necessarily relate it to diabetes or to, heart disease, but it really does impact these things. So I'm glad you brought that up because yes, coaching definitely focuses on stress and stress reduction, and it's just as important. Mental health is just as important as any other health related, chronic condition and things like that. So.
Right. And I know you guys have mentioned that before, you're looking at the person as a whole, so there's the mental health, but like you said, there might be the diabetes, but it could be weight management, it could be stress, and it can be even, sleep. Mm-hmm. And Grace, do you find that when people are there, some ideas when they first start Teladoc and after they've been in the program for a while, have you seen how people's views maybe change on what they thought and expected at the beginning versus, maybe a year or two in the programs?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that when someone initially starts with the program, there's some, if they're newly diagnosed, especially, right, it's scary. It can be very overwhelming. I know Michelle touched on this. And then even just discovering, oh gosh, now that they have a relationship with their provider, they're checking their blood pressure. Maybe it's a little better or a little worse than they thought. Oh gosh, I could get help with my weight management. And so being able to address all of these different chronic conditions, we actually even see improved outcomes when we take this multi-condition approach because they are so interrelated and rarely exist alone. And so I think that people really like that. I think it's also our approach where it's just this unified app, right? You don't have to have an app for your diabetes and your weight management and your hypertension or a coach somewhere else, right? You can find everything under one roof, as I like to say. So that also makes it so it's really convenient. And then that mental health piece, I think, is another differentiator for us where you can easily access digital in the moment tools and content. There's coaching for mental health, as well as, we have our teletherapy and telepsychiatry with Teladoc Health. So we really, truly do have something for everyone. And I think addressing all of that in one place really makes a big difference too.
And I think what you mentioned a little earlier too, Grace, was, knowledge is power, which it is. And so for someone out there who just wants to absorb things, there is the library that they can just go to on their own, correct? And just kind of take a look and kind of peruse and see different topics that they might want to get some information on.
That's right. We really have, self-serve. So you can go and find evidence-based information for yourself, as well as, if you need higher touch and you want to connect with a coach once a week or once a month, it's really up to them. So again, really having tools and resources and support for everyone. And then Cindy, if you don't mind, I wanted to go back because I can't help myself because this is what I do. Is talk to clients and prospects about all the benefits. And so with our diabetes management solution, I think one other big barrier that we eliminate is if you are stressed oftentimes, or you're having a hard time dealing with your diabetes or better managing it, is sometimes people will ration test strips and maybe not check as often because they only get so many and they can be expensive. With our solution, they receive all of the tools, that's including unlimited test strips and supplies, so that they don't have to ration or think about, oh gosh, I shouldn't because I'm going to run out of test strips, right? It's unlimited, no out-of-pocket cost to the member with our solutions. And not only that, but it's got a built-in algorithm. So it's keeping count every time they insert a test strip. When they get low, they're going to receive a reminder. And then we're going to eliminate another potential barrier, which is access, because we're going to mail those supplies directly to their home as well. And I know we're talking glucometers, but we also recognize that more and more people are starting to use continuous glucose monitors. And so we currently have a partnership with Dexcom so they can sync their Dexcom CGM into the platform where we further enhance that experience. And then we're looking to also partner with the other CGMs in the market as well.
Well, Grace, thank you so much for bringing that up, because, we know everybody can watch and see the news, and the cost of healthcare and the cost of medicine and things is expensive and hard for some people. So that's a huge, huge plus that I think you mentioned there, and so important, to highlight, so someone doesn't have to worry about that, because their health is important. So Grace, thank you so much. And Michelle, thank you so much, both of you, for what you do for Teladoc. You can see the true passion in both of you. And I think you've helped give everyone an idea here today on some of the things that they may not have known that Teladoc can do. And Grace, I like that you mentioned also there was even some more therapy besides for mental health. So it's not just, talking about, chronic conditions like heart disease and so on. So thank you again, Grace, Michelle, for being on the show. I greatly appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thanks for having us.
Opportunity.
And I thank our audience for watching, and I hope you the best of health. And I think you've heard a lot of great information today on Teladoc. So thanks again for joining us. I'm Cindy Kainz.